7th grade was when my videos started to gain more traction. I hit 50,000 subscribers. And it was a really weird dynamic because there were some people that I was trying so hard to be friends with in 6th grade that like all of a sudden like paid attention to me. And then other people would like make jokes and certain things.
Annie, I want to start our chat in kind of an odd place.
Okay.
And it starts honestly like with me scrolling on LinkedIn. So just imagine, as an audience member, you're just scrolling on LinkedIn one day and you see a 16-year-old creator pop up on your feed. She's starting to post about internships and the likes, and it reads, quote unquote, looking for summer internship opportunities. For the last 8 years, I've been building my personal brand on YouTube, amassing over 400,000 plus subscribers. Immediately, by the way, I see this and I'm like, okay, well, that's a unique story. I need to learn more. So that's exactly what I do. I message her offering my support, and I get to know this creator, helping her navigate hiring an editor, offering some support in transitioning in management, and redefining her content. You then meet that creator in Boston while you're on a trip with some friends. And Annie, I start with this story because you are that creator. You are that 16-year-old creator who was asking for an internship when I was that guy scrolling. And despite our chats over the last few months, I want to dive deeper today on who you are as a person, as a leader, as a creator, and as a world builder. And so let's start there first with, what was your impression when you get this random guy who comments on a post of yours asking about internships?
Honestly, I was like, yo, this is kind of sick. Or in a way, I feel like, at least in my last few years, like on the internet, I feel like I've been a lot more social. When I first started creating videos, it was kind of just me and like maybe a small group of other like friends that were also pretty like small on YouTube. And I didn't do a lot of what you maybe call networking. um, but I was like, okay, this is chill. Like I low-key feel like the more people that I've talked to and the more strangers, I've almost become desensitized. So I feel like maybe you can relate to this, but like I feel like the difference between a stranger and a friend is like, or like the barrier between those two is like ever narrowing for me, which can
Mm,
sound like dangerous. But I think that just like being a creator, I think you meet a lot of new people and it's a really normal like part. And I think I was really curious also to learn more about you, because looking at your stuff, I was also pretty curious about that too.
sweet. So take me back to the early days of when you start. I have your YouTube pulled up right now, not to put you on the spot. First video, what's in my backpack? 22,000 views
Yeah.
6 years ago. So a creator for at least 6 years. Take me back to those early days. Why do you start creating and when?
Yeah, for sure. So I created my first video like 8 years ago, and I think YouTube had changed their policies for like young kids on the internet. So they like immediately privated like most of my videos.
Oh my God.
And like I kind of forgot that those videos existed because in the early days, I loved watching like Ryan Higa and like just like meme channels. So I would make my own like comedy skits. Or one of my favorite older videos I made was a video titled How to Be Gangster. So yeah, it just kind of showed how like flamboyant my personality was, especially in elementary school. I just said the most out of pocket things. So I made a lot of like videos that were like expectations versus reality,
Yeah.
or like types of boys you'll meet in like in elementary school. It was just, yeah, it was unhinged. But I kind of forgot about those videos. And then when they were privated, I went back and watched them. I'm like, okay, I'm not public. I'm not going to intentionally keep these up. But honestly, I've considered just like publishing all those videos. I'm not sure what YouTube's policies around like young kids is now, or
Hmm.
like if those videos would get like flagged. But in the early days, I just made the most random videos.
I love that. And so talk to me a little bit more about that. Why? It was just creative expression. Like, why not become a theater kid? Why go and post your videos online?
Yeah, I think that for me, I've always been a very talkative person, for one. And I think YouTube was a place where I felt like being annoying was actually appreciated. That some people really did enjoy my videos, because especially growing up as a youngest sibling, I think a lot of the times my siblings would make jokes and obviously very lighthearted. But I think that sometimes as a little sibling, like you just grow up like subconsciously just thinking that you're really annoying. So I think that posting on the internet, it was like people could intentionally choose to watch and listen. And I felt like I could just hit record, talk for 4 hours, and then I could choose what I wanted to keep. And I also think I did have kind of an entrepreneurial spirit when I was younger. I would always sell door to door. I mean, now I don't think this is the best strategy, because like I think that people were buying into me like when I would do bake sales. I would like go door to door more
Wow.
just because like I was just like a chubby kid and they felt bad about saying no, and people would like donate, like, oh, keep the change. So I don't know if I was actually exchanging value or following any like entrepreneurial principles. But I think that growing up, I've just always had less hesitancy in terms of taking risks. Like my siblings and I, we all grew up watching like the same YouTube videos. Like my sister was actually the one who helped me set up my Gmail account when I was in
Hmm.
kindergarten. So I opened my Instagram account when I was in first grade. My sister helped me do that. So I kind of got on social media at the same time as my sister, who's 5 years older than me, got on it. But I think looking back, maybe the reason why my siblings didn't end up creating their own videos after we watched a Ryan Higa video together was just that maybe I just had no consideration for risk. And sometimes people ask me, oh, how did you get the guts to start creating on YouTube? And in some ways, I'm like, I'm so grateful that I started when I was 8 because I did not have enough brain cells to even think about the social ramifications. I was just like,
Hmm.
let's create. And there was nothing in my head about that.
When did you notice the first bits of friction with people around you?
I think that it was in like seventh grade. Middle school was definitely a weird time for me because at least how my like town is structured, like some people say it's divided, some people say it's not, but there is like a north side and the south side. And growing up, I like did not know that many people in my town. That it's still a small town that lived in the north side because our elementary schools were separated by location. So in elementary school, I would say that I had somewhat good social standing where I always felt like I kind of knew the scene of my school. And then getting thrown into middle school where all three elementary schools kind of congregated together, it was kind of just, I guess, a shocker for me because all of a sudden I was like invisible. Um, and I remember sixth grade, I tried so hard to be popular. I really wanted to enter this popular friend group, and it just definitely was not working for me. I don't really think that I truly belonged or anything. But I think that that sixth grade period was like a really tough time for me. And I still kept creating YouTube videos, but it wasn't like a big thing. Some people knew I made YouTube videos, but it wasn't super successful. And then seventh grade was when my videos started to gain more traction and like people actually started watching me. And I think I hit 50,000 subscribers or something in seventh grade. And it was a really weird dynamic because there were some people that I was trying so hard to be friends with in sixth grade that like all of a sudden like paid attention to me. And I think like some people were super positive about it and then other people would like make jokes and certain things. But I don't think anyone was super intimidated at that time, like in middle school. But I think sometimes in high school it starts to become a little bit more competitive because people start thinking about like their own like economic value or like college applications. I think I've had a lot of people been like, oh, you don't even need to worry about college applications because of that. And then no one's explicitly told me that they feel like threatened or anything, but I think sometimes that does worry me
Yeah,
that people are thinking that. Yeah.
I hear that. Tell me a little bit more about how it felt to have 50,000 people observing your life in seventh grade. I remember when I was in seventh grade, nerdy. I called it my ugly phase, right? I was basically I called it my troll phase, as a matter of fact. Reason being, my ears were growing faster. My shoes were way bigger than my body proportionally. I was just all over the place. I can only imagine. I was self-conscious just walking around my middle school. What did that feel like to have that much more attention on you in that environment?
Yeah, I think that for me, it definitely felt shocking and exciting, but
Hmm.
I think to a certain degree, when I look back at it, I don't think I was super shocked that people wanted to watch me because I think I did understand like the value like of my content because I think the video that first propelled like an actual community to be like we're gonna watch Annie because other videos I made were like more kind of SEO based of like, for instance, copyright songs you can use in your YouTube videos. No one was like, I'm gonna subscribe to Annie, like I love this person.
Yeah.
But the video that I made was titled Where's the Diversity on YouTube? And I was addressing a scandal that happened with a brand trip. And pretty much my perspective or like thesis was like, as a young aspiring person of color that like wants to be a creator, it's really discouraging to, see this happen. So I think people started to resonate more with my story, and I could kind of understand why they did. Weirdly enough, I feel like it's become more complicated in my stage of life now in
Okay.
terms of how people perceive me on the internet, because I think that I've always really desired growth, but in like later middle school, early high school, it was more, I guess I was more of a static character where I was always growing intellectually, always trying to read more things, always trying to improve in that area, and not as much in like just even my relationships or spiritually or physically. So I think now as I'm becoming more of a whole person, sometimes I'm like, how much do I want to share with that on the internet? Because I have
Yeah.
some creator friends where they're like, oh, I overshare on the internet. And you know what's going on with the boys that they're talking to. Like, I don't know, all these story times of things that happened. And they kind of let out tea here and there, right? And then I know some creators who they kind of just share their thoughts, like what's going on here. Also, some creators were like, they'll go through a lot of stuff. They'll be really vulnerable about that, but they'll post it like 6 months after the event, so it's like
Yeah.
less raw. So I think I'm trying to figure out how much of my life I want to share.
Where are you finding that boundary right now, and how does it compare to when you were younger?
Yeah, I think that when I was younger, I never really considered people thinking that, oh, you share too much or whatever. I honestly think that in high school, especially when you start to think more about relationships, I remember like there was someone that I liked over the summer, and I knew that they followed me on Instagram. So I feel like every single time I posted an Instagram story, like this is a mental battle I literally to fight, because I'm like, this is one person out of
Yeah.
thousands. And if my mission is to truly help Gen Z young women, I wouldn't hold back something just for one person that's not even my target demographic. Like I'm like, this is so stupid, because I'm technically like holding my business back in that way. But sometimes, like when I was younger, I never thought about the concept of someone like watching all my videos to figure out more about me. But now as I meet new people, like let's say I do meet someone that I like, and they have that power and leverage to read all my LinkedIn posts, listen to all my podcasts, watch all my YouTube videos. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's really interesting. Because there have been times where I've talked to even just friends where they like really enjoy my videos, and I love that and I think it's really cool. Sometimes I think like, but how much do I know about them, Like
Yeah.
when is the knowledge gap even out?
Yeah, that's weird because they can have almost that same parasocial relationship with you, but then also know you in real life. Do your close friends find that you're the same person on screen as you are with them?
I think that I've never really asked them this question, but I think I can tell kind of the differences of how I am, even just on this podcast or recording my own stuff. I would definitely say with my friends, I at least at school, I don't really talk that much about personal development, self-exploration. I think that with my friends that also create content, I think they see a lot more similarities between our conversations and my content. But I
Yeah.
definitely say at school, I'm pretty different, or I'm more like, I think at school I try not to share my thoughts as much and be like more receptive to others, but I've also had to find the balance of sometimes like I wouldn't want to share something in my life because I'd be like, oh, I'm always posting on social media, so like I should be quiet at school. But then I realized that like in a lot of ways that shows that I'm not vulnerable, or it's kind of me closing myself off. So I try to like express like things that I'm struggling with to my friends. But there are times where there's certain things that people just won't fully understand. But I think the friends I have are pretty supportive, even when they don't understand.
Makes sense. Let's talk a little bit more about folks who aren't supportive. Can you talk to me a bit about a time, maybe it was even in seventh grade, the first time that you remember someone saying something negative about the videos you made, how that made you feel, and then also how do you respond to a situation like that?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, a lot of the negative things that I've heard from people kind of closer, at least location wise, about my videos, I haven't witnessed firsthand. A lot of things have been on private stories on Snapchat, and I deleted Snapchat, I think like 3 years ago. And part of the reason why is I think I was just like, okay, let's just be more productive. I'm not finding authentic like communication here. But also, I think that it was just a defense mechanism of like, if there's any hate, I don't even want to see it. I don't even want to hear about it. I remember some of my friends would be like, oh, this person like said something about your video. And a lot of the times it would be people like nitpicking small things or like, trying to cancel you or being like, oh, what you said there is like maybe like politically incorrect or XYZ. And there's definitely been times where I wish I was a lot more considerate in what I said. And I think this is something I'm still trying to find a balance with is I think earlier in my content creation journey, I wasn't very considerate or not thinking about what other people that come from a different background might think about what I say. But then I think now there are times where I try to disclaim everything to the point where you're just talking yourself in circles and you're not even saying anything at that point. Or I always start thinking about counter arguments when I'm even talking. Like, I think that today I was just recording a podcast about how to deal with bad days or kind of ruts in your life. And I was giving the example that I recently started working with an accountability coach, and it really helps me. And I think I spent like a minute being like, you don't need to get an accountability coach. Like, there's other methods you can go. And I'm like, oh, you can talk to your parents. But then I was like, oh, but if you don't have a good relationship with your parents, all this confusing stuff. And I'm planning to record a podcast episode soon about how to stop the cycle of like fighting with your parents and issues. Because my parents and I have been working through a lot of things. It's been so interesting. But I was thinking about like, oh, how do I disclaim like people that maybe their parents are like out of their life. And yeah, it's just like you have to find the balance between being tasteful with your content, but not being so apologetic about every single like case possible. So I think a lot of the times people would nitpick specific things. And a lot of the times looking back at it, I'm like, okay, I could understand you didn't like what I said there. But I've always preferred when people actually talk to me one-on-one about it. And I think sometimes people would message me one-on-one, but it wasn't a conversation. Like, I don't think they genuinely wanted a response. I think they just wanted to send me a paragraph and like they were talking to me, but kind of like they didn't even want to have a conversation about it. So I think that can sometimes be frustrating, and like being okay with some people viewing you as a villain, which I know sounds like kind of dark, but like I think I've realized that I cannot say, oh, I'm a perfect character, I'm a perfect person. Like, anyone who's been unsupportive of my channel at my school is completely in the wrong. Because that's not true. Like, there's definitely things I've said on the internet that I would take back or being more considerate about. And, like, a specific example is times in the past, I think my content would perpetuate, like, negative, like, diet culture. If, like, I was trying a new diet, or even just during quarantine, just this 12-year-old girl, like, trying to experiment with different ways to be fit. But I definitely think there were times where more review could have been useful, like having even an advisory board of like wiser people that understand my intentions to tell me, this is not going to send the right message. But I think I've had to be okay with some people just never forgiving me for things that they didn't like in the past. And I think especially in high school and like when you go to a smaller school, and I'm working on a video for high school freshmen actually at my school for like orientation stuff. And
Sweet.
I don't know if this is too honest to tell them, but in terms of social advice, I would say my school is like 800 people in total.
Wow.
A lot of the times people's first impression of you does not change throughout high school. Like, there's very few people that are just like willing to forgive and really change perspectives. And I would say my friends are pretty willing to forgive, and some people criticize that, like, why are you friends with that person that like made that mistake in the past? Sometimes I'll be like, why are you so forgiving? But then I realize it's because they have that grace that we're even friends. If they were so quick to write people off, I would have no friends right now. So yeah. I think that's something the journey I've had to go through with backlash, and specifically like people local to my life.
How do you think people perceive you upon a first impression?
Yeah, I think that, are you speaking for like people my age, or like what demographic of people?
I love that you asked this question, because I do think it changes depending on the person. Well, let me just throw it back to you then. What do you think is different depending on age or of demo?
Yeah, I think that people's age can play a role. I think it's like it's one of the variables, but I'd say the variable is like how like confident someone is in themselves.
Okay.
Because in the past, I did think it was more of an age thing, where I noticed that as I've grown older in high school, right now I'm a junior, there were some underclassmen that would like see me in the bathroom and be like, I watch your videos, like I love them. And it
Those
was like
bathroom
shocking
chats.
to me. Yeah, it was shocking to me because I never had really people be so like expressively supportive to my channel. And like, interestingly enough, my mom was a chaperone for my prom last weekend. She was talking to a parent of like a kid that I barely talked to, but the parent was like, my daughter watches your daughter's videos all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I thought this girl hated me. Like, what the heck? Like, I'm like intimidated by her. So it was really shocking for me to actually get verbal support. But I realized like, oh, this underclassman, like, when they view my videos, they're like inspired by it. They don't really feel like threatened or any really negative emotions per se. So I think that does play into it, but also someone's just security overall. Because I think I've talked to like some guys my age. Maybe I'm just reading into it wrong, but I just get the sense that they feel competitive, or I don't, just the way that they talk or like the questions they ask. It seems really competitive. But there's definitely like, I have a friend who is my age, and he's very much like, you know, you're gonna go amazing places in life. Like, I'm so proud of you. Like, I loved that video, and just very like supportive. Like, this is your thing. Like, that's really cool. So I've realized it's not necessarily an age thing, but I think being someone's same age in this kind of stressful season of life for a lot of people, especially junior year, I think it just kind of brings that out a little bit more. And then I think older people, like, I think people who are maybe from the ages like 18 to 22.
I love how you say that's older. I feel like an old man now.
just objectively older than me.
Oh, okay, got it.
I think that they enjoy talking to me because they feel that like we can talk in the same intellectual level, but it's also refreshing to them. I think I feel so uncomfortable saying this because everyone's perception is going to be different. And Ashley, you can tell me if what I'm saying is wrong. I'm just basing this off a conversation I had with someone recently where they were like, oh, it's so refreshing to talk to you because just your outlook on life. And like, it's like one of the most wholesome conversations I've had in a while, because I think I've learned a lot from people, but I still kind of have a youthful and a little naive perspective on life in terms of like I haven't experienced a lot, and I have to be aware of when people like take advantage of that. But I think that it's just interesting for people, I think, sometimes, because I still have like, I guess, a pure heart, or like there's a lot of things I haven't experienced. So I think older people like that sometimes because I'm coming to them of like, I've never experienced this, like give me advice, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And they can speak freely and just know that I'm actually taking in what they say. Because like when you talk on a peer-to-peer level, I feel like there can be a lot of like arguing of like, are you sure? Like my experience with that has been like this, you know? But there's certain things like I've never had my freshman year of college, right? So when people give me advice, I'm not like arguing with them. I'm kind of just like receiving their experience and being like, oh yeah, that's really cool. Like, can you tell me more? So I think people don't feel judged or intimidated. Yeah, and you could take that in a positive or a negative way. I don't know, but I just think that may be how it is.
I'd echo that sentiment. I think the thing I was most struck by our first conversation was how like humble you are, all things considered, right? You've run a 6-figure coaching business plus content business. I don't know how much of that is one or the other. You have a successful YouTube channel, which I think almost everyone wants to be a creator at a young age at this point, or at least aspires to that level of influence and fame, etc. And yet, when we first talked, I was just remarkably impressed by how clear you were in your questioning. A lot of folks, when they start asking a question, they have like 6 different things. You were just like, let me ask you directly about that. And then how humble you are, all things considered. I was like, wow, 16. I thought back to my 16-year-old version of myself. And that's where I think some older folks might get into that almost like comparison game. At least I know I did. And I've spoken to other folks who also know you that are like, damn, like I wish I had her level of confidence at her age, her ability with words, her ability to just have clear vision, because it is rare. That's the truth. And I imagine that also comes with conflict with people your age. You've mentioned in some of your videos, I'd love to tease on this vein as well, this idea of you having grown up too fast, you being like in your head spiritually older than you are physically and the people you're around. How do you reconcile that dissonance, that difference between who you feel and who you feel most connected to age-wise or even demo-wise versus who you're currently around?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think my relation to this has changed a lot because I think sometimes I'd like view being mature for my age as like a curse because I remember like even just a couple of months ago, I felt the more desire to like experience like high school things. Like I want to experience a first relationship, you know, like all my older friends like say how much they learned from their first one or everything. So I feel like I would just get really frustrated when I felt like there was like a certain guy my age I was talking to that I just wasn't really connecting with. And I definitely don't want to be like closed like minded to that, but I think like even just with like friends, like I would just naturally connect with like older people easier. So I think there were times where I was like, oh, like that's so frustrating because like, you know, if a lot of my friends are older and like they're going on a trip, let's say to New York together, like I gotta go through my parents, you know, if I want to go. Like I'm probably gonna have to bring a sibling or whatever. So a lot of times I've like met internet friends and like I go with a sibling or someone or like my parents drop me off and I'm just like that's just like so not cool, but I'm like what, you know, I can't really control it, so we'll just like make it work. But I think there have been times where I've been like insecure about that in terms of like relating to people my age too, because I was like, you know, I don't want everyone to like view me as so old or whatever. But I think recently I've been embracing it more of like I don't need to just have one or the other, or like there are certain moments where I can just tap into different parts of myself. And also I feel like it's really unique to kind of be a dynamic character or like have duality, like oh she's this and she's this. I even noticed like for prom, I actually really enjoyed. I feel like prom is actually like a personal growth moment for me, okay? Because
Tell me
like
about it. Tell me
a
about it.
lot of the times I learn from experiences that are very like high school or people my age. So for prom, I didn't go with a date, and it's really funny because my mom was literally berating me for this like for a whole month, and then after prom, she was like, "I totally understand why you didn't ask someone, like good job or whatever."
Yeah.
But I kind of just like ran it through like my head, and like I know that some people in the past have had experiences where like they were like, "Oh, I need to bring someone to prom." This girl like asked a guy to prom, and then it just feels uncomfortable the whole time, or kind of like you just asked someone because you didn't want to go on your own. And I was like, okay, I need to challenge myself, like have self-confidence. And I was also thinking in the back of my head, like, I want to make a really interesting video concept, like alone at prom, and like talk about the whole concept of like self-love and use this story as kind of an anchoring point for it. So I was thinking content. So I decided I'm gonna stick to my guns, just like go by myself. And it definitely revealed to me like still parts of my character that I want to work on, that high school is such a good place to learn. So we were at this pre-prom photo taking session at one of my classmates' house, and this is like invite to everyone in the school, but it was kind of only specific types of groups that went there. I felt like, and I was the first one of my friends to arrive there, and I felt pretty socially uncomfortable. Because there were a lot of girls, like, I didn't actually feel like they liked me or that they wanted to talk, so, like, I would find myself kind of talking to the parents, trying to avoid that area. And that made me realize, like, I feel like the best version of myself, it doesn't matter how maybe popular someone is in high school, like, just go talk to people, you know, just walk up to people, even if it's not your cup of tea or, like, type of, like, environment you want to be in. So, I've definitely not conquered everything in high school, you know? And I saw this like quote from a book. It was like, you know, karma will keep on giving you like the same, I guess, problems until you learn the lesson and respond in the way that you should. So I think a lot of the times situations that I'm still uncomfortable with in a high school environment show me that like I'm not perfect, you know, I'm not too mature for high school, because I clearly still feel some social awkwardness or fear. And even like when we got to the high school from the house, we all walked down like in an orange carpet, because that's like the color of our school. People went down with their dates, and some people who didn't have dates just didn't go down the orange carpet, and I just walked down the orange carpet on my own. And I actually felt pretty confident going down there, because I was like, this is my Getty Images moment, okay? We're manifesting movie premieres. Okay, like I was like, I'm just gonna embrace this. And it was such a good personal growth opportunity for me because even when I was like about to walk in the orange carpet, I did feel anxiety. I did feel like, oh, like I don't really want to do this. And like I was kind of forcing myself to do it. So it's like prom gave me that opportunity and environment to grow in a new way. And it didn't stop with the pictures. Even from when we started dancing on the dance floor, and like these were like, I don't know, we were like listening to like, I don't know, rap music or like house EDM. And I think that a lot of, I guess, people who are very academically inclined in high school and that don't party that much feel very tense in their bodies when it comes to school dances. Because I was like, wait, I don't even know how to dance. I was like, ooh. And it was just everyone on the small dance floor. It was so sweaty. It was so like unfamiliar for me. And I realized my body is so tense, and something I'm trying to focus on is just surrendering. Like not even mentally, just like physically. Like not being tense. Like if someone were to hit me, like I'd be able to just like fall down.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes the instinct is to be so like, I don't know, clenched or whatever. So I gotta just relax and try to be fully into it. And it felt like a whole new experience for me. Like I don't have many moments where I'm not thinking about what time it is. I am not even thinking about like, I'm not analyzing anything, right? I'm just in the middle of sweaty bodies and I'm just dancing. And then after all these really like hype songs, there was like one slow dance song. And I was like, okay, if this experience is truly for my personal growth, I'm not getting off the dance floor. So I slow dance with myself.
Wow.
On the dance floor. Everyone was in pairs and I was just dancing. I think some of the teachers and chaperones were like kind of confused. But I just like stayed on the dance floor and I was like, wait, this is such a good moment for my YouTube video. So like I start to walk up the dance floor so I can like set up my camera to take a video of this. And then my guy friend is like, Annie, do you want to dance? And I'm like, oh, you're ruining my content. I didn't say that, but I was like, oh, me trying to have my independent girl moment and like, but I thought that it was a really good growth opportunity for me because I felt so uncomfortable the whole time. One, because I feel like I'm never like, my body's never just like in surrender or like dancing, but also I'm dancing alone during the slow dance on the dance floor. But I feel like those are kind of just examples of I'm like, I'm gonna fight all the demons that I can in high school now. And I feel like my friends definitely kind of help me relax more. And I want to be someone who can talk to like a wide range of people,
Yeah.
you know, because I'd much rather be in my situation rather than feel really uncomfortable talking to adults or even just people who are a couple years older than me. So, yeah, I really think that the way we view ourselves like can be flexible based off the narrative we want to have on it. I think I used to kind of view it negatively as like, oh, like that's so sad. I grew up so fast. But I think now I'm just like, let me just embrace it because I have amazing friends that I would not have maybe if I didn't grow up so fast.
Yeah.
So I think I'm much more like embracing it now.
I love that. Two of the most important stories I think we tell ourselves, and you've already tied into one of them, is the story we tell ourselves about ourselves, aka I've grown up too fast, or the stories we tell ourselves about the world around us. For those folks that are out there right now that just heard that story of you and sort of self-empowerment and deprogramming some of these thoughts, what were helpful steps for you to take to get to that point of security?
Yeah, that's really good. I think that this is definitely going to be another moment where I'm like trying to disclaim things, but I definitely think that I am blessed to have a lot of just objectively external validation in my life. Because I, like, every single day, I just feel so grateful that I have so many friends and mentors that are willing to support me. I don't, like, say this in an arrogant way, but if I'm struggling with something, it's like, I have at least 3 people that I could text or call about that specific issue, you know, that I know will love and support me. And that is such a blessing. Above all the, you know, external, like, material achievements. So I think that even though I did have that, though, I still had so many, like, limiting beliefs. If people would say, like, a compliment, I feel like immediately in my head, at least, I would deflect it. I'm like, oh, I didn't really believe that about myself. It was only until I had more conversations with one of my really close friends, Elizabeth. So every Sunday, we kind of do an accountability call where we talk about our goals or just what we're going through in life. And she is like a very confident woman, and she's like 25. So like she is like in a different like stage of life as me as well. But we kind of live parallel lives because we have a lot of similar realizations, but kind of just about different things. But she just speaks so confidently about herself, and almost every word she says is like an affirmation. So I almost like felt really stupid at times when I was like talking about my doubts to her. Not because she wasn't validating them, but I'm like, my self-talk and what I'm saying is so different than what she's saying. And a lot of the time she'd be like, Annie, like just trust yourself. So I think first off, when you have friends that genuinely love and believe in themselves, it becomes so much easier for you to recognize kind of the areas in which you're doubting yourself. Because I think if you're around a lot of people that self-deprecate like very, very often, I think that makes our own, I guess, doubt in ourselves become just more normalized. So I
Yeah.
think that definitely made me like wake up and realize like, you know what I'm saying, it's not normal. And then I think intentionally like trying to view myself from like a second person or like just like third person perspective, in the way of like someone would say something affirming to me, and then I would actually think about their perspective, right? Like what made them think that? Like are they just saying that to flatter me, right? And also finding common themes, right? If there's a specific compliment that a lot of people have said about you, like I think Asher, you probably got this a lot, but I feel like you're an amazing conversationalist and you're very caring, empathetic. So for instance, I feel like a lot of people probably say that about you. So it's like just recognizing a common theme, right? Viewing it objectively. A lot of people have probably said that about you. So it's like hopefully they're not all just flattering you, like, and especially if it's a specific compliment, right?
Yeah.
Because anyone can be like, "Oh, you're a very kind person." That's a little bit more general maybe. But there's like specific verbs where like there was like maybe a 3-week period in my life where I had several people call me charismatic, and like maybe some people use charismatic really often, but I'm like, it doesn't just roll off the tongue, at least not for me. So I
Yeah.
started thinking about that more. I'm like, you know, what caused them to think that? So I think it's looking at common themes and actually viewing yourself from like that other perspective, to gain more self-confidence and feeling more confident in the way that you care about others. Because I definitely don't give my energy and time to everyone, but when I'm with people, I really try to be fully present and give that to them. And I think I try to ask myself a lot, like, why don't you expect the same? Or, like, why not? And to just live out your standards and not feel the need to communicate them, but to just act according to them.
Yeah. Well, first off, I appreciate the compliments. And I love what you're saying here as well. In my opinion, one of the more valuable experiences I've had, I also mentioned this to you once, was actually asking my people that I valued, right? Folks that I felt were close to my life, contextually relevant, and that I appreciated for all of the things that they would generally advise me. I would ask them directly, what do you think my greatest strength and my greatest weaknesses are? And it was very illuminating. I did it back in high school. Honestly, I'm due to do it again now that I'm graduating college, which is literally in 3 days for anyone who's listening, which is absolutely insane. It's one of the more important experiences I did, for the most part, because it made me realize, is my external perception the same as my internal one? There were definitely some things that were on par, and there were other parts where I was like, ooh, did not realize that was an issue, but also very glad to know because I can focus on it. That, I think, is a blessing. And you've mentioned blessings and also a degree of faith that I think I want to dive deeper into.
Yeah.
And I want to start the conversation around faith because I know it has an important part of your life. And I know we touched on it even when we saw each other in Boston, but not as much as we ought to have. I want to start the conversation around faith around the Psalms of Matthew 5:14 to 16, which I know is in your Instagram, but I have no idea what they are. So I want to learn from you. What do those passages mean to you? How do they impact your life?
Yeah, so I feel like I sound like a fake Christian, but I low-key do not know what passages you're referring to, and I have to look them up in like my Bible. They're definitely not memory verses for me.
Okay.
But
They made
I
the
literally
gram
sound like
though.
a
That's
fake.
all that
I
matters.
sound like the celebrity Christians, that just like wear a cross.
Hell
I
yeah.
promise that.
All right, let's
I
go
could do a better
a
job
level deeper
memorizing
though.
verses.
Go a level deeper. Tell me, like, what is
Yeah.
faith's relationship to you, and then also how does it impact your life, your relationship with Christianity, etc.
Yeah, sure. I can kind of tell you a recent story. So, I last or one of the last church services I went to, I pulled one of my pastors aside and I was like, I need to talk to you. I need your help. So we went into a separate room and I told my pastor, I'm like, I'm just so sick of being Christian.
Wow.
I don't feel like doing this anymore. Because when I first started going to my church, I got pretty involved like early on in terms of like leadership. Like I even like preached a couple times, and I think that I put unnecessary pressure on myself just perform in a certain way, because even just growing up, and I think it's pretty common in like Asian households, is that you're very congratulated for like your actions or like your performance. So I think I like carried that mindset into my relationship with church. And it was only until like recently, I think it was honestly like getting on LinkedIn, talking to a lot of people, having coffee chats, it's almost like catalyst for me
Okay.
to start like questioning things more.
Oh no,
Because
capitalism's got you.
it made me like more exposed to different perspectives, and it just like made me start to question like, where do my perspectives come from, right? And even in like the realm of politics, like I think that I've never been super involved, and when I was younger I'd kind of just be like, I'm a 12-year-old, like stop asking me. And people overall like accepted that. But I think as I'm starting to grow a little bit older, and I know that especially like on college campuses, it'll be a pretty common conversation like about maybe politics or how people feel about certain issues. Where like now I want to explore a little bit more, and I think sometimes like an unhealthy mindset I would have is like, oh, like I already know all the codes to life like from the Bible, so it's like, why would I spend so much time, exploring other views, or like we got to focus on capitalism, we got to focus on business, right? But I think it kind of just like made me want to understand like, okay, this is what I believe, like what has really contributed to that. But I'm really glad I had that conversation with my pastor, because what I wanted to do was kind of just to peace out and like stop going to church. But I had to be very clear of like, is it really that God is mad at me? Or is it because like I'm just like I have my own emotional hurt that's getting in the way of like how God really is, right? Like that's affecting my perception of God. Because I think there are some Christians that just have like a very healthy relationship with their faith. And when I talk about an unhealthy relationship, I mean like in high school I haven't really explored that many things. Like I only went to my first high school party, which was more of like a gathering, like maybe like 2 months ago. And like I didn't really drink, but it was still kind of an uncomfortable environment for me, because it was just like kind of the first time being exposed to that.
Yeah.
But I never really felt the desire to like explore more things. But I felt like because I got so involved in church at an early age that I kind of like committed myself, and I kind of felt stuck, like I couldn't explore, right? I'm like, oh, what if I did want to start sprinkling in some swears, right? I'm like, would that like, if I'm really involved in my church, right, would that like tear down like the reputation of my church? So I started to feel all these like concerns, and almost like, oh, am I kind of trapped? Almost like when creators say, oh, I'm this niche, right? And then they want to explore with different content, and they're like, oh shoot, like how do I really do this? So I was like, okay, let me be vocal about it. So I talked to some of my pastors like about how I was feeling, and I think they were really like receptive and supportive of, obviously they're not like, oh Annie, like go drink, go do all these crazy things, but I think that I've had to like consciously like focus more on my relationship with God rather than like all these rules. Because in my mind, I would always, I feel like, be doing like a performance review on like my faith, right? Like how often am I reading my Bible? Like what's my church attendance, right? Or like I would be scared if like, let's say I want to post like a funny video from a party like on my social media, right? I'm like, oh, how is all my Christian followers going to view this? Everyone from church. So I think that was kind of just like stressing me out. And I think a key characteristic I think that like Gen Z has is we want to be authentic to a certain degree, where sometimes like we don't really want like, it's really hard to like explore religion as like a member of Gen Z. And I think that's why a lot of people like to explore spirituality, because there's not as many like rules or maybe social constructs, because you have that free space to explore. Like I don't love the idea of like partying till you're blacked out on a Saturday and going to church the next morning. I mean, I'm not going to judge other people that do that, but like I guess I'm not fully comfortable with that concept, or I'm not fully comfortable serving in my church at a high capacity, like being a speaker at the front of the stage, when like I'm still unsure what I believe, right? Because it's like, how do you even like sell a product, right, that you don't fully believe in? So I started communicating with some of my leaders at my church that I was feeling that way, and I think it feels really humbling because I feel like I'm kind of starting at ground zero with my faith again. I'm just relearning the basics, right? Like, who is God? Like, what does He want for our lives? Because I think I was kind of falling into the pressures of, I guess, like American Christianity, of
Okay.
like what culture is like in the Bible Belt or like the South, of people getting like married really young, or like a specific even fashion style. So I think I'm trying to figure out what does my relationship with God outside of traditions or just certain standards I put on myself actually look like.
What have you found so far in that exploration?
Yeah, I think that something that I've explored is that like God actually wants us to like explore different opinions and to understand like the world. And I think more about like how Jesus was in the world. And a lot of the times, like the Jewish religious leaders would be like, "Why are you hanging out with all these drunkards, right? Or like these prostitutes?" And in some ways, like some Christians, let's say like I'm hanging out with my friends that let's say they just dress promiscuously, for instance, or like they're drinking.
Sure.
Some Christians could be like, why are you surrounding yourself with those types of people? Because there are some passages in the Bible that are like, walk with the wise, don't walk with the fools, or different ways that people interpret things. But I think about how Jesus would be in our 21st century. And like, I think that a love and like deep relationship with God should always result in more compassion for the world and understanding the world. So I kind of had to realize like, I do want to understand the groups that are specifically marginalized by the Christian church, and like I want to make an intentional effort to understand that, or like even people's views on like different structures of how romantic relationships work, right? And actually like exploring their mindset instead of just writing it off. But I think it can definitely like get confusing, because I think I've also heard from all like the sermons that I've listened to, some people are like, "Oh, guard your heart, don't consume like too much media that's like contrary, to God's word, because that can be like a trap of the devil." I'm still
Mm.
figuring out how I feel about that. And I talked to this author that came to visit like my old church and talking about her books. And growing up, she like read everything. She's very much like an intellectual, I guess, and like taught like at a university. And she brought up this debate topic for like the parents to discuss. It was like, should our children read as many books from the past as possible? Like, should there be any limits, or should they just read everything? And people were on like different sides of the argument, and she felt that children should be able to read everything, or like she was just a very curious reader, like she just like ate up books and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of asked her that question, like, did you ever get backlash from the church, right? Because let's say like I'm reading this like very, maybe what the church sees as like an extreme feminist book, or like a book about, I don't know, like sexual freedom, or like untraditional marriage structures. And I post on my Instagram story like, "Oh, this is just my current read." Like, I'm not actually like, "Oh, I love this book," but I'm just reading that, right? Or like I go to the movie theater and watch a movie that maybe some Christians would judge. Like, I'm like, "Oh yeah, I probably could get judged for that." So I kind of asked her if she got backlash for that.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Yeah, some people won't understand." But she also did say like, have conviction in your heart, where like, let's say you are watching something that is like making you go into a really low emotional state, or like feeling depressed, like have the wisdom to stop. But I'm kind of still figuring that out for myself.
That's incredible. I think one of the biggest red flags, for me at least, with folks that are very attached to their religion, I've come in conflict with a lot of folks who are very dogmatic with their beliefs. But what I appreciate about what you just said there is the openness to explore through the lens of like finding your relationship with the thing that you've been told to engage with. Whereas I'll be very candid and honest for myself. Like, I'm Jewish by background. I think a lot of the folks that listen to this show also know that, because we've mentioned it a few times. And I will be totally frank and say that I have not engaged with the content of my religion as much as I probably ought to, in large part because I just wanted to run away from it. I was like, this doesn't serve me, goodbye. But I never tried to figure out what components do serve me. I tried to do an exercise when I was a freshman in college. This was like pre-pandemic, where I was like, I want to read every major religious book that there is. So I was like, the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, in the Bhagavad Gita. I was like, those are like the 4 top most important ones to read. Annie, guess how far I got into that experiment?
Maybe like 10 pages.
Yeah, not too far. I think I got maybe a few chapters deep in the Bible, and that was about it. I think the hard part is
Genesis
just like
tough.
consistently showing up, right, for those things that it doesn't necessarily seem like it immediately serves you. And to that same vein of how it serves you in your day-to-day life, how do you think your faith interacts with the way that you create? I know you mention your faith or Bible study or your relationship with Jesus in your videos, but more as like a subtle plug, not like a, hey, like you're not like the Christian YouTubers that are like very on the beat in points. So how do you navigate, bringing that into your content, and how does it affect the way that you tell stories?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of the times, like when I've really hit like rock bottom moments, it has been like God that's really, I guess, like brought me back to like my core and like even just like inner child of, I think a lot of times in my videos, I talk about like toxic productivity or like burnout, or I think a lot of my viewers like have this desire to achieve, and definitely something that I resonate with, and I think that's kind of why like they maybe resonate with my content. But a lot of the times I can get like swept up and not really understand like the focus, or just feel this pressure of like I have to make it, I have to do all these things. But then I think my relationship with God really brings me back into the feeling of just like being a child and like ultimately being taken care of like by the divine. So I think like when, let's say I'm really like, I'm stressed, I'm so tired, I have a physics exam the next day, like I will pray about it, and sometimes like I'll feature that like in one of my videos. And I think it also gives me a perspective of like the blessings that I have in my life, like thank you God that like I do have this platform and like people that appreciate and support me. And also I think like my creator friends that are also Christian have played like a big role in me kind of thinking about my relationship with God. And they also kind of story tell really well, where actually like today in like an hour I have like a kind of a Bible study discussion with a couple creators. We have kind of a club that's like called Creators for Christ.
That's cute. I
And
like that.
one of the YouTubers in it, her name is Katie Yu. She made a video recently where she like documented like the last 3 months of her life, where she kind of been struggling with like depression and her journey through that. And she like included Bible verses that really like spoke to her like throughout that process. But she has a really beautiful way of kind of storytelling in that, where like she doesn't pretend to be a perfect person, and like documents the struggles and kind of how like God loves her even when she maybe fails to follow like a rule or whatever. And I think that talking to my friends, or they've told me a lot about like the mistakes that they've made in the past and are not afraid to talk about certain things. Like bi-weekly we'll also just have discussions on things. So we've had discussions like about sex, we've had discussions about money, and everyone is just like very open to talk about those things. And it's really interesting because most of them are like kind of in a later like stage in their lives. But yeah, I think a lot of the times my disconnect with like religion or Christianity would be that I didn't know many Christians that lived a lifestyle similar to what I wanted. And I'd actually talked with someone on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago that I think that they currently live in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
And they were telling me about like the church that they go to, and was telling me a little bit more about how their faith has evolved. Because I don't know a lot of people that are, let's say, in like the startup space or the creator economy that are very dedicated to their faith, and definitely been meeting more, and like talked to Chris recently, which was really cool. So I think that I was starting to feel like I don't see a future or like a trajectory where like my faith grows, or I would have this limiting belief that like God cared about me when I was like directly serving him, like reading the Bible, worshiping, but he didn't care about like my intellectual interests, or like he didn't care about like the startups that I wanted to be involved in. But I think that that was just because I didn't have as much of like a broad frame of reference for what other people's relationship with God looks like. So I think in my content, I think like the way that I want to present my relationship with God is that like he loves you even through the imperfections, because I'm not a huge fan of like the Christian content that's very like how to, or like all these rules, but actually like talking about the ways that like you currently mess up. Because
Yeah.
a lot of people say like, oh, I like it's impossible to go a day without sinning, but it's like tell me, what was that sin? Like, I don't know, or like, what are some examples? So I really like how my friend Katie Yu, like she talks about stuff very openly, or like what she's struggling with, and like how God is giving her grace through that situation, which I think more people need to hear, and it's really relatable for people.
Agreed. So you've mentioned in that same story, the benefit of being a creator at times is the ability to connect. It's actually number one reason Joey and I started podcasting again. Was I told Joey, make content to connect, don't make content to scale. And I want to talk more about what some of these unforeseen benefits are of being a creator. You've been doing this for 8 years now. What have you noticed to be the biggest benefits that have manifested in your life from creating online?
Yeah, so this might sound silly to some people, but I feel like you gain an arsenal of superpowers.
Ooh, I like that.
One, you can teleport. I'll explain each of these.
Please.
And then two, you can kind of, I don't know if I want to use the word like manifest people into your life, but like things can just happen very fast. So I'll first go the teleport part of like, I've had some internet friends. Like, we kind of just met over Instagram DM or even LinkedIn. Like, I've low-key met some of my best friends on LinkedIn,
Wow.
oddly enough. But like, stars will kind of just align and, like, we'll meet, like, maybe even, like, 3 weeks after, like, having a conversation. Where this is also a big pro of being in the college search process. It's literally an excuse to travel. My parents are like, oh, educational opportunity, let's go do it.
Yeah.
So when I went to UPenn, I was just having like the time of my life because I was meeting
Sweet.
like my friends. So that was really fun for me. So like, yeah, I feel like when I mean like teleport is like you go from like this internet interaction to like something that's in person, and it kind of just happens, you know? So I would say if like, I think about it as kind of like verse jumping, where like the layer of like the internet and like actual real life, I feel like is very thin. Like you can kind of just like jump into the real world from the internet, or from the real world like jump back into the internet. I don't know, like for instance, I saw you in person like maybe like a month ago, right?
Yep.
And now we're talking like on this podcast, and that kind of like ties into also like the, I guess, manifestation of people in your life quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Where like, let's say there's someone's content that I just really liked, and I just think in my head like, oh, we'd be really good friends. Like sometimes that will literally just happen, maybe even like 2 months later, or like they'll reach out or I'll just reach out. So I think that is just like such a powerful thing. I don't know. And I think the way I view making friends is just so different now, where like I don't view it to be super hard, or like I think sometimes it can be a negative where like I need to check my ego, because I think when I meet so many people on the internet, it makes the pool very large, where sometimes like I'll get into a bad mindset of like, oh, if I have all these great friends on the internet, like, you know, why would I be spending my time maybe with this other person? Do you know what I mean? Like when you just view the world as so large, because it's like really hard to not compare certain friendships and stuff, because you do feel that you have more control or autonomy over people who you spend time with. So I really try to make sure that the way I'm thinking about my friendships is actually coming from like an authentic perspective, not like how am I just feeling in the moment. Because like the difference between like internet friendships and like just like friends that I see like every day in school is like we're probably gonna get more annoyed with each other more frequently, my friends and I at school, right? Because we see each other every day, and we see each other in moments where maybe we're stressed or just not present. But like with my internet friends, when we actually meet up, it's very intentional, right? So it's like, of course they're going to be present with their time with me. Of course it'll feel really fun because it's like exciting. We've built up this anticipation. So it's hard to not compare those relationships. And I'm actually really curious what your perspective on that is, as someone that has like that in-person circle, but also a lot of friends on the internet.
Yeah. So it's funny when you talked about like internet friends and the intention that comes along with it, and building and releasing tension. In a sense, an internet relationship is like a great microcosm of what a good story is, right? It's that same building and releasing tension that you need to get to a point where you have that excitement, where it drives you to go and do something. Whereas we can take very easily for granted the folks around us, because you might not have that same cadence of the good stories that exist. So a weird like cyclical nature to all of that. But the way that I've started to parse through this is I've started to realize the people I feel closest to are my internet friends. I have I'm very blessed and lucky to have a lot of people who I really think are incredible humans in my world, but I don't see them all the time. Like, ironically, one of the closest people to me, Max Reisinger, who's been on the show, who you also know because we've been on calls
Yeah,
together.
Max.
We were talking yesterday. Max and I have only ever been together for the longest period of time of 1 week, one full week. I'm seeing Max next week for a handful of days. He's hopefully going to come to New York for a few weeks as well as we build out our marketing agency. And it's so odd to think about that I've only ever known this kid in person for a week, because I practically feel like he's a brother at this point. And that's the real benefit, I think, of, devices like our phone or the computer or whatever else have you used well, is if you can use the platforms to connect as opposed to divide and create all vitriol, etc., and also use your content to, Max referred to it on a podcast with Danny Miranda, which, by the way, if Danny's listening, like, I love you. He's a close friend now, but
Yeah, I love his podcast. I listen to it
he's the
sometimes.
man. And honestly, a little bit of an inspo for us to get back into it, because when we saw Danny and Max recording together down in Austin, we were at a retreat. Max referred to creating content online as energetic echolocation for the people that you want in your life. And we kind of clowned on him at the time, but I think it's so true, where it's like what you put out to the world is what you get back. And so, like, by no means do I have a major platform, but I've been able to connect with so many cool people because we've built trust over time and you gain those relationships. Whereas the people I have closest to me, maybe even physically, I felt increasingly distant from, which is troubling, but also I think an indication of, I think my interests might just be slightly different from other people. And I'm glad that I'm at a moment in time where I don't just have to have the one or two friends that are interested in that in my physical surrounding. Because imagine for folks who are in like small town USA where they want to go become a filmmaker and everyone's like, well, I'm going to go become an electrician. Like, that is a deeply depressing scenario for those people, because it's like you are against the full pack. Whereas today you can find your friend from Salt Lake City, even though you live in, Wesley, Massachusetts, and still be connected to each other. So I'm immensely grateful for that. But it's always a weird thing to sort of figure out to what the weirdest thing is when the internet friends and the real life friends, quote unquote, because they're all both subjective, clash and like come together.
Have you had them clash?
Oh, those have been weird moments. Yeah, like where they'll meet each other and they know me through different lenses. And I'd like to think I'm like a pretty consistent person across the board. But people definitely get to know you in different ways. Like, my freshman year college friends know me even differently than my senior year college friends. I'm now butting heads with all of that reality as I come in contact with all those folks again as I begin to graduate. But when the internet friends get lumped in together, it's like, whoa. It's like the Matrix like came into my real life. It's so wild. Have you ever had a situation like that?
Not really, and I really want to try it out. And so I was drafting some Common App essay ideas, and one of them is kind of about internet friends and like how that's affected my life. And I was thinking more about like, do I want my worlds to merge together, right? Because I think I watched one of Simon's videos where he threw a party at college with creator friends and his friends from college, and I was like, oh, like that's really cool, because I feel a lot of guilt sometimes when I say like, I can't relate to people locally to me or whatever, because I just feel like douchey for that, or I don't know.
100%.
I'm like, okay, let's try to not think like that. So I really admired seeing that in Simon's content. But I'm like, right now, I feel like one of the most realistic ways for me to do that is like, I bring all my friends on a Zoom call, which I don't feel like doing. Or I guess like when we met up, I brought my brother and like his friend from college. But I also think that was a different dynamic where like they were older. But I try to think like my friends from high school, right? Like if they were to also be with my friends that like are a couple years older, like how would that like connection be? And I think it would be really fun my senior year to like throw a big grad party in like New York City and like, fly my friends out from my hometown and all my creator friends and just see what happens. It sounds kind of scary, but yeah, I don't know.
No, it's great. If you learn how to navigate those situations well, I genuinely think it is a very valuable skill. I have a select few friends who I think navigate those relationships really well, like sort of just smushes people together. My friend Aman also has been on the show before and is now a bit of like a TikTok star, which is kind of incredible to see. But when we were in high school, he would always put together events. Like, his mom is a wedding planner. I think it kind of flows in his blood a little bit at this point, but he's really good at just like he'll bring together some of his friends from the creator world and our hometown friends and mush them together. And of course, sometimes they're separated, literally even physically, because it's like, what do we talk about? But it is kind of cool to see how he'll like overlap that. Similarly, Chris Duncan, who you've met and leads up the Creator Camp crew, which I absolutely love. He does a fantastic job, I think, as well, of bringing people from disparate different interests or backgrounds, whatever it may be, and finding the overlap and giving the opportunity to connect. Like, even if it's literally just a line of like, hey, you know, Asher likes to make podcasts. Danny, you and him should connect. And it's like, oh, it's those folks who figure out, here's a common thread that you guys might not otherwise realize or never get to because you think you're super different. Boom, connect. Such a valuable experience. It's one that I'm trying to get better at myself as I think about hosting events and everything else as I move out of college. Where do I want to go from here? I wanted to go full circle with mission. You hinted early in our conversation around your mission with what you create of empowering young women to be leaders. How'd you get to that mission? And also, how do you view yourself as a leader?
Yeah, sure. So I think, well, like the mission that I feel like I need to become better with being more confident about the mission. Maybe I just need to change the language. I just feel like it sounds so formal. But
Okay.
my mission that I have, like mission statement, is to help Gen Z women leverage their youth through purpose-driven productivity.
Love that.
And I think that kind of on the topic we talked about, like growing up fast or whatever, I do think about there are like some areas where I'm like, okay, maybe I did try to grow up too fast in that area. I think being the youngest sibling, I'd always tried to like experience things at the similar time as my siblings did, or I was just always curious about what they were doing. But I think there are specific areas in my life where I've like tapped into at this age that have just really helped me personally, not only professionally. I think it was when I started to have more conversations with my community, and this is something you encouraged me to get back into, which I'm really happy that you did. The other day, I was doing like a study session on Zoom with one of my subscribers, and that
Love
was
that.
really fun to do. I think when I started talking to more of my subscribers, because I wanted to start up the coaching business, learning about people's struggles, I just felt like people didn't have a role model they could look up to and what they wanted to do that was like their age. That maybe they had like these entrepreneurs that are like in their 20s, or these YouTubers that are like living alone in New York City that they're like, oh, like I love that. But they don't really see like a path to get there. Or they don't see a lot of creators that are pursuing their academics while also content creation. Because there's a lot of creators that are also like my age and kind of like in the general niche. And I would say like most of them are not super like devoted to their academics, and I don't actually think that's bad, because I've definitely considered in the past, you know, like, is it better to like try to do the whole academia thing and YouTube, or is it better to just fully grind in this way, right? Because I think like economically it could potentially be better to just focus on social media, like build this nest egg or whatever. But I also try to think about the personal fulfillment side of like, do I want to have such an untraditional path, and what do I really want? um but I think that a lot of people that were more academically driven or wanted to be super ambitious potentially couldn't relate to that content, so I just wanted to like bridge the gap there. And I think that a lot of the young women that we're talking to just didn't feel like they had the permission to like even start in what they wanted to do, or were just like, I think a lot of questions, there were like some Instagram accounts that would ask me the same question like month by month, like, how do you get started, or like how do you be motivated, right? And it's like I want to help people get out of that spot, and for people to find a deeper mission to why they get up in the morning. Because also something I really appreciate about just this stage of life is that for the content I create, and this was especially helpful when I was actively running my coaching business, is that every day I was around my target audience and my customers, right? Because although there weren't any like students from my actual high school that joined my program, they were similar to the demographic of customers that I was targeting. So every day hearing from my classmates the things that they were struggling with, like why they didn't start their own passion projects, kind of helped me understand like who I was marketing to also. Because I think a lot of people put all their eggs in this basket of like academic validation, and I think this is why some people, and I am speaking from the perspective of like, you know, I haven't gone through this process yet. I really hope when the college app process is ramping up, I'm not like super stressed. And I believe that I won't be.
Mm.
But I think some people, it's this built up tension this whole high school time. And then, especially in the last few years, the college decision process has just gotten even more competitive in terms of like acceptance rates and everything like that. So there's definitely been people like at my school or kind of like even in the Asian like community circle in my town where it's like everyone thought they would get into this certain school and then like they didn't, you know? And everyone felt so disappointed. It was like such a loss. And it's because people place so much of their eggs in this basket of like an institution, you know, deciding like where you go. And I think I really want to embody the values of entrepreneurship, even if it's like you're not, like it could be like running a nonprofit or just doing something that's self-driven. Because I think so many people just limit themselves when they work so hard for something that's not even guaranteed. You know, it's like, I don't think we should be idolizing these institutions. And I've been like realizing that more of like, I really just want to help my audience figure out like, regardless of things that we can't control, like how can we find personal meaning, fulfillment in our lives and live full lives? Because I definitely see so many teenage girls like be susceptible to even like unhealthy relationships. We're like in school in our wellness class right now, we're learning about like domestic violence. And
Mm.
it actually has been like in my subconscious, I think about it more of obviously I don't know all the specific reasons that like go into someone like getting into that relationship. But I do think a lot of the times when you don't feel that you're in control of your life or that there's a specific deeper mission that you're working towards, it's a lot easier to get sucked into little things or to just become a target for things. But I think when you're clear on your vision, it's just very hard to shake you. People might be a little intimidated, but it's safer for you in the end.
Totally agreed. Who would you be if you weren't a creator or an entrepreneur or a coach? Who are you absent all these things that have become to define you?
Oh, that's such a good question. I honestly think. Ooh, I was gonna say something about like a therapist or like something in ministry, but I feel like that's so similar to a coach. That's tough. I would say. So if I were to think most realistically about what I'd be doing, I would probably be going down the more like traditional education route and then be one of the consulting kids, you know?
Okay.
And maybe I might try consulting, but when I hear about consulting, I can see how it would maybe fit my personality.
Okay.
So maybe I'd be a consultant.
What about absent any of the titles of like a prescriptive, you are this, you are this? Like
Ooh,
who are you at your core beyond like the what you do, you know?
yeah. I think that I would still tell a lot of stories, but it
Mm.
might just be like on a less public scale because like as I told you, my sister helped like set up my Gmail account, and in kindergarten I would journal all the time on Google Docs and write little short stories. And I was like reading some of my old journal entries from kindergarten. I was like, oh my gosh, I was so out of pocket. Like I would talk about like my teachers and everything. So I think even from a young age before I started making YouTube videos, I just loved to write. So I think even like I love writing on LinkedIn because I do love writing and expressing myself in words. And sometimes I get frustrated that like I guess people prefer more fast-paced content or like videos because I'm like I want to write essays.
Yeah.
But I probably like I'd write I think a lot and spend a lot of my time thinking about thoughts, reading like philosophy books, like sharing my thoughts on those. Yeah.
As a storyteller, which stories are you proudest for having told and which do you wish you'd get a second chance at doing?
Ooh. Okay, I'll answer like the first part of the question.
Oh yeah.
And although I haven't posted the prom video yet, I am really excited to tell that story
Hmm.
because I think like I learned so much like from it, and I think it's like for some people prom is a very nostalgic or at least romanticized like part of the high school experience. So I'm excited for just like the theme and like energy of that video. And in terms of a story that I wish I could tell again, I almost wish I could tell my story again, like about like the video, like YouTube fame made me lonely in high school. Because I still have so many follow up thoughts to that. Of like, I'm still figuring out like what relationship I want to have to like the internet and like friendships like in person as well. And I feel like I would have liked to address more of the nuance of the mindset where people are like, oh, you should have people that are like-minded and push you. I feel like I didn't fully address that because I don't disagree with that, right? Like, I think I still have a very uncomfortable relationship to that whole idea where I think it's true to a certain extent, but I'm scared to be like fully on board. I'm scared to be like, they don't serve the purpose, cut them out. You know, like
Yeah.
I think that I'm still forming my ideas on that. So it was hard for me to fully communicate that in that video, but I just feel like there's more nuance and there's more things to say. And I predict that in the future I may post stories that are contradictory to certain things I may have said in that video. Because I'm like, oh, maybe it went too much in the opposite direction of too much of stay comfortable, stay in your small town. So I don't know.
That's the beauty of life, right? Like it's just ebbs and flows and you change your opinion and it's part of the story too. And in a sense, your channel and everything you've created, it is all part of a greater story arc, even though you've made, mini films along the way. And ironically, the conflict that you have with your own beliefs builds that tension into who you actually become. So I love that. I want to end this chat with what I refer to as the DP3, 3 questions to end the chat on Depolarized. The first one is, what's something that you've recently changed your mind on?
Something I recently changed my mind on. So many things. I always get I get so scared of how quickly my mind changes. I was talking to my brother about this because he was like, you literally change your whole life ideology like every 3 months. And that's low-key true. I think something I recently changed my mind on was the importance of where I go to college or just even what that looks like. Because I kind of had that mindset that like, oh, this my main focus for this next year is going to be my academics, getting into college. And I thought that meant, oh, I'll just be posting less on YouTube. And I think that limiting belief going into it almost like made me post less consistently because I didn't even expect that. Like my first call with my accountability coach, we talked about our goals and she was like, why can't you hit 1 million subscribers and get into the school that you want to go to? And I was like, yeah, wait, that's a good question. So I think I like kind of self-sabotaged in that case. But I started reflecting more on what I actually wanted in my college experience. I also started reflecting more on like my friends that go to the colleges I want to go to. When I visited UPenn, I had a conversation with my friend Daniel that kind of like, it really opened my mind where he was telling me about how he wants to switch positions with me because he is really interested in the creator economy. And he's like, like I would do anything, to be in your position. And I don't know, I think that was like a big mindset shift for me where I was like, things, it's not like I get into this dream school, like I'm not just going to be immediately happy for 4 years. Like I'm not going to walk every single day on campus for all 4 years and be like, yay, I go to this school. There's nothing else that I want. And also seeing my friends that are content creators, I've been researching Santa Clara and watching Max's videos on college, even just conversations I've had with him. Like he asked me, he's like, what's your biggest fear about college? And I was like, feeling like everything I want is just not like in the physical place I'm at. And then he was like, I'm living your worst nightmare. And I was like, okay. So I think that I used to view like college as like that's gonna be my main life, but now I view it more as a backdrop and asset. Like if financial security is the thing that I'm worried about, like it doesn't necessarily matter a ton like where I go. I still want to go to a great school, but I view it more as like an addition to the life I've already created instead of like I need you to let me in because my life will like deteriorate before my eyes if that doesn't happen. And yeah, just reflecting more on like my friends that go to those schools, their lives aren't perfect. And like one of my really close friends also goes to UPenn. He is so disciplined and posts every single day on social media, but it's hard, like a lot of the times his friends are like, oh, I haven't seen him in weeks because he's like working on his content, and school. And I'm like, that could be me. And I'm like, do I want that lifestyle? I don't know. So I'd say it's made me a lot less detached to every school that I research because I'm like, I'll have struggles anywhere I go.
Precisely. No, you're totally on the ball with that, especially as you're going into it. I'm glad that you realized it. I did not. I was one of those folks who was like, where I go is such a meaningful, because it's like everything you're told about success as a high school student is where you go. Ironically, where you go is not who you'll be. And maybe the hardest thing I've at least faced in college is realizing, even in the school that I'm at right now, my interests are very distinct from the mass populace, which is okay. And it also allows me to have my own unique asset in conversation. But getting comfortable with that shit's hard. Being confident in that, that's even harder. Luckily, I think you're well positioned for any school that you go to. They will be lucky to have you because I think you're an asset generally. But if I've learned anything from Max's story, it's that it's not as easy as it looks, especially when you have something pulling you outside of the college world, because it is an all-consuming environment. It is tricky. Second to last one, part of DP3, is what message would you impart to a captive audience of your critics right now? Folks that criticize any of your videos, the way you live, or the way you operate.
I would ask them, why not you? Or like, why is what you want to achieve not possible? Because I think a lot of the times when people think that what they want to achieve is not possible, they don't like want to even attempt to get there. And I think also, I think a lot of the times when people like feel insecure, it's very like difficult for them to hear something that's kind of empowering or like confident. Even I feel this myself. I honestly relate to like a lot of like what critics would think to what I'm saying, because I think in the last even just like few weeks, I've definitely had to reroute a lot of my mindsets and like limiting beliefs and things that like there's things that my close friends used to say that I would say are more mature than me and have gone through like this mindset shift that I used to get kind of triggered by, or be like, is it okay to say that? And now I think I have a lot more self-confidence and like faith in myself in a way where I'm kind of scared of it. Or like I would say that I'm giving my content some lag time to match up with the thoughts that are going on in my head right now, because I need more time to process them. And I think that's kind of, I've definitely been dealing with more, I guess, fear, or it's been uncomfortable recently because I went from not posting on social media that much to recently, like ever since I met with my accountability coach, it's really helped me kind of gain momentum with creating content every day. But it feels almost narcissistic because I went from my camera roll just being filled with these like screenshots of like physics textbook problems, no pictures of my face, to just like a ton of like videos of myself, photos of myself, me sharing my thoughts on life, and me literally knowing that my thoughts on life change every 3 months. Yeah. So it's just kind of like scary. And especially like also with the struggles of like what I'm figuring out with like my faith too. It's like, do I want to document these contradictions that I'm dealing with and just address, I'm a confused teenager, just be along for the ride, you know? Like I feel like that's kind of been more of my mindset recently, because I'm like, it's too much to just be walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that I would just tell my critics to truly just believe in themselves and their value. Because I definitely see myself in what like my critics, because I think a lot of things come from like limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
And negative thoughts that we have. And I think I'm always thinking about the counter arguments, or sometimes I get worried about like preaching like hard work, or yeah, because I start thinking about like what people would say. So I definitely say it's like have self-belief, but I don't know. Yeah, this is a really good question because it's making me think more. I feel like my response to this is not super eloquent, but it's what I'm thinking on the spot.
You're totally good. You've been eloquent across this whole thing, and I appreciate you jogging with a question like that. That's the point of DP3, to knock you off your horse a little bit. Last one, hopefully a little bit easier, but one I'm definitely curious to hear your take on. What is giving you hope in the world right now?
I think what's giving me hope in the world is just that there is so much love. I feel like all around me and in my life, like every single type of love, you know, like familial love, like friendship, romantic. I just feel like everywhere there are just so many moments of love in every single day. Like even just that comment on YouTube of someone saying that something really impacted them. Like I got this email the other day of someone like telling me about how much my videos have impacted them. feel like sometimes I get desensitized to words or desensitized to actions, but I
Yeah.
just thought about it more. Someone took the time out of their day to email me, like, not even knowing for sure that I'd even see it, right?
Yeah.
Like, about how much my videos impacted them. And I'm like, would I even do that, right? Like, because usually I'll listen to something like, oh, that was really good. Like, I usually don't even like stuff on social media that much. Sometimes I just, like, watch the Instagram thing, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And I kind of just, like, forget to like. So I'm like, the fact that someone took that much time to express gratitude and just, like, the unlimited love of friendships, too. I don't know. I feel like I'm just always in awe of my friends and, like, how compassionate they can be and how loving. And it makes me very sad when people don't have that in their lives, because I feel like that is, like, a big part of, like, I guess my hope is that there's just, like, so many people out there, and I'm always hopeful that like I've only scratched the surface of the amazing friendships that I can have. And I'm just really excited to, one, see my friendships grow,
Yeah.
but also, like, meet new people.
Love it. Annie, how can people plug into your world?
Yeah, so my main platform is, like, my YouTube channel, but I'm also very active on my Instagram at AnnieLongYT. My YouTube is just my full name, Annie Long, but on my Instagram, I typically am posting stories every day and reels. Also, my TikTok is Annie Long. And follow me on my LinkedIn if you're into that. It's just my full name. Yeah. Low-key trying to become a LinkedIn influencer.
I like
I
that.
had an addiction to LinkedIn for a bit. I'm more moderate with checking LinkedIn now, but I love the platform.
Good. So if anyone at LinkedIn is listening, definitely hit up Annie to be a sponsored creator of some sort, to be in part of that LinkedIn accelerator. But I also feel you on that. I think it's underappreciated. Would highly recommend to follow. Annie, I can't wait to watch your journey. You're so young, so capable, and I know only great things are coming your way. So thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate you. And that is a wrap.